Today I'm going to show you how I decorated this fall wedding cake. This cake is being decorated with pumpkins and pine cones. So this cake is going to be a 3-layer cake with red velvet, chocolate, and strawberry cakes. So in advance, I started with creating some small pieces that will be used to decorate the cake. This is some white chocolate and some regular chocolate, milk chocolate. I'm using these molds. This is some white chocolate that's colored orange. I melted it down and now I am putting it into these small pumpkin molds. I have a small little, it's a vibrating back massager that I've only ever used for this purpose, and I use this to shake out the bubbles that form in the mold, and it ultimately leaves holes in the chocolate. And so I do this because it decreases the amount of bubbles that stay in the chocolate after it has cooled. So I just kind of hold this along the sides of the mold and it decreases those. So after letting the chocolate in these molds kind of set, I'm removing them from the molds, and then I go back and I am repairing any of the small holes that do remain in the chocolate. Because this is a wedding cake, I want it to be as perfect as possible. So I am going to go back and repair as many of the small imperfections in the pumpkins as possible. So here I am just using some of my tools, and I'm just filling in the spots with the melted chocolate and making these just perfect. Ultimately, they look really great when they're done. So once I'm finished with these, I had to make quite a few of these. Then I go and I begin to make some of the other decorations and include some pine cones, and I'm making these out of fondant. So I have some brown fondant that I'm rolling into balls. Then I'm shaping them into a pine cone shape and putting them onto the end of a skewer. And then I am using a pair of scissors and I'm cutting up each one of these the whole way around, and it will create what looks like a pine cone, as you can see here. So I am going to do this the whole way up, and I'll show you how I do 2 of them. Ultimately, I had to do quite a few of these as well, but I'm only going to show you 2. And this is what that looks like. So then I take it off and I put those aside and I let those harden for several days in advance of actually having to decorate the cake. And as I'm going up, I'm just kind of spinning that skewer so it's going the whole way around that shaped piece of fondant. And this is what they look like. You can see they look very much like pine cones. And now I'm going to stack the cake. This is the day before the event. So I'm putting some buttercream onto my cake board. This is a relatively small cake, so I am using just a cake board to kind of stack it, but I am going to move it over to a thicker gold board once I get it stacked. So I have my chocolate on the bottom, and then I'm going to add some buttercream and make it smooth, and then add my next layer of cake. And this is my red velvet layer. And I'm getting low so I can make sure that this is even. And I'm going to add my last layer, and this is a strawberry layer. And making sure that this is straight. And now I'm going to go back and crumb coat the cake. These are 4-inch cakes, so they are quite narrow. So I'm using my hand just to kind of hold them still. I find 4-inch cakes probably the most difficult to decorate, especially the crumb coat part of it. I feel like they're very unstable. It's so light of a cake because it's just a 4-inch that's sliding off of my thing here. Like I said, I find these the most difficult to crumb coat. And here I'm using the bench scraper just to smooth that out a bit. And once I have that smoothed out, I'm going to put this into the refrigerator and give it an opportunity to crust over before I go back and add my final coat of icing. So now that I have the crumb coat done, I'm going to move this over to a better cake board. Probably could have started here, but decided I was going to first put it on the other board, and now I've moved it over to this better cake board, and now I'm going to put the final coat onto the cake and then smooth it out nice and crisp for the clear canvas to decorate. Here I am adding some dowels just to firm it up and to make sure it's nice and sturdy. As I mentioned, with this being a tall, thin 4-inch cake, I find them to be the most difficult and probably the least sturdy just because they're so narrow. So I'm hammering that down into the cake board to add some additional structure. And you'll notice it's not moving quite as much as it was a few minutes ago. And we are almost there. And now that we have that pretty clean, we're going to go back and we're going to begin to decorate. So I'm adding just a little bit of a white beaded border around the bottom just to add a little bit of class. It looks like kind of like pearls along the bottom. Just using some white buttercream. I think this is a 4-tip. And after I get the whole way around, I'm going to go back and I'm going to just clean up those dots to make sure there's no peaks on the end of those. I'm using a paintbrush to do that. Just kind of pushing those dots that are left on the pearls from me pulling the piping bag away from the pearls. I have that pumpkin there on the cake board just so I know where I started and where I ended to make sure that I cleaned up each one of the pearls. And I'm calling them pearls, but they're just dots of buttercream icing. And now that I have that cleaned up, it's time to begin adding those pumpkins and pine cones to the cake. And so I'm going to speed this up a little bit to get those added to the cake. The customer wanted this to just be super classy, not over full. This cake is only for the bride and groom. The guests at their wedding are going to have cookies that I also did. There's a previous video already on my channel, as well as some cupcakes that have fondant leaves on them. So this is just for the bride and groom. So just a small cake for them. Once I have these pieces of chocolate and fondant added to the cake, I'm going to go back and I'm going to add some vines of green buttercream just to add some additional color and class to this cake. With that paintbrush, I was cleaning up any buttercream that you can see peeking around from when I stick these elements down onto the cake. Adding some leaves too, as well as the vines, which you'll see here momentarily. And once I have this greenery added to the cake, that's pretty much going to wrap up the whole design of the cake. This is pretty simple cake, but really just kind of high class level for this cake. Super simple and sleek. Really love the design of this cake. They did a great job picking this out. And with that, this is the final look of the cake. If you enjoyed watching this video, I encourage you to like, comment, share, and I encourage you to come back and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content. Thank you so much for joining me, and please, please, please come again, and please comment to increase the chance of me showing up in your algorithm. Thank you so much, and have a great evening.